Cool. Maurice Waters, formerly known as DJ B-Side, owner creator of the Brand Digital Media, hometown kid. When I think about how I am here in this space, in this time, shooting this video, there's a lot of perseverance. There's a lot of praying behind the scenes. There's a lot of grit. There's a lot of heartache. There's a lot of joy. It's life. We're literally sitting in my brainchild. You know what I mean? This is my room 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. You know what I mean? There have been times, middle school, you dream about these things, right? And so to kind of sit in it is very thankful, very thankful. I don't give myself enough times where I do just stop and do a mile marker, like we were saying. But this is literally my bedroom. You know what I mean? Every single room in this, every single office in here is a iteration of 8th grade, 10th grade, college dorm, first studio. You know what I mean? So I love that it feels that way. All the posters have always, there are certain things in these places that I've never let go of, and some sort of weird hoarding thing that I do. But it's all a reminder of where we started, where I started, what the hopes, what the dreams were of that kid in middle school. What are you going to do with your first camera? Let's just grab the boys and go shoot something. You know what I mean? So how we get here is, who knows? Like I said, trailblazing. There really is no roadmap. There's a lot of faith that says just keep walking. There's times where you should have quit. There's times where you should have just kept the job. It takes an animal. You know what I mean? I forget sometimes who that guy is. You know what I mean? I forget the guy who used to I had no car. I rode a motorcycle for 45 minutes at a time in the cold. You know what I mean? I had a 42-degree kind of rule for myself on my motorcycle, right? But anything above that or just below that, I was riding. You know what I mean? I had no phone. I had an iPad. I couldn't call you unless I was at Wi-Fi. Nobody knows that. You know what I mean? That was a short time ago. You know what I mean? It's cool. It is, I don't know. There is an animal that you have to be. There's a monster you have to be. And now that I sit in this space, it's almost like I can't forget who that guy is. You know what I mean? That guy is being awakened again, and it's cool to see from the outside. You know what I mean? So, evolution requires you to lose control. It requires you to be open. It requires you to be in the moment, to be free, you know what I mean, and to be okay with mistakes. And I think there was a level of evolution that I was okay with that. You know what I mean? And before you got here, where I evolved to was fear. You know what I mean? I evolved into, you have to have control. You know what I mean? And I was getting to a point where things felt so out of control that I tried to micromanage every single little detail, and everything had to be perfect, because if I make a mistake here, there's no telling what could happen, right? And then, like I said, I lost sight of how I actually got here, which was out of control. You know what I mean? If If younger me walked in here and I'd be like, bro, you are out of control. Like, you have to get your life together. Like, you have to do the things. And I lost sight of what that monster was, what that guy fought against. You know what I mean? And now that I put that into words, there was no control. There were no thoughts of failure. There were no thoughts of what happens if the worst case scenario was, and that's where I was. I thought about recently. I was thinking about, like, man, if this falls apart, what do we do? But there's a story, there's a saying, there's a thing where Vikings pull up to the shore and they burn the boats. There are no going back. There is no going back. There is no plan B. And that was fun. That was alive. That was electric. That was the thing that was. I mean, even now, just thinking about it, just makes me smile. Like, bro, you did that. You did that. You know what I mean? And when it comes to business, I put myself in this business suit. You know what I mean? And I try to fit myself into where I saw clients at, or where I saw people I was telling stories for. They have a suit on, they present themselves away, and that's where I tried to get. Like, oh snap, that's what I want. I want that. You know what I mean? But I lost sight of the artistry. I lost sight of the recklessness. I lost sight of the jazz, the boom bop bop pow. You know what I mean? And it felt very classical. We have to come in. We have to do timesheets. We have to do this. We have to keep things in order. And none of that worked. And one of the scariest ways, none of that worked. You know what I mean? And now getting back into, let's just shoot it. Let's just go. Let's just do. Has gotten me back into this fun piece of being an artist. You know what I mean? The business is going to come. The money's going to come. You know what I mean? All the woo-woo you want to do. You know what I mean? When you stop trying to control everything around you, everything then flows. You know what I mean? And if you think about, if you hold a seed in your hand and never turn your hand over, it'll never get sunlight. It'll never grow. And that's, I mean, melting the two, right, is a delicate little dance. You know what I mean? And it's not a dance of classical music. It's not a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. It is jazz. And you got to be okay with a little jazz and improvisation. If that's even a word, you feel me? You got to have a little jazz. You got to have, and that's who I am. You know what I mean? I tried to put myself in this classical little box and come on in and let me talk to you. You know what I mean? That's not what people gravitated to. That's not why people said, Maurice, you tell a story. You know what I mean? They wanted me to tell a story because of the way I approach life, the way I approach this business. Maurice, how are you doing this in between two news stations? How are you doing this against every single media mogul in this area? You know what I mean? Places from here going across the bridge. How are you competing with that? I just do jazz, baby. You feel what I'm saying? I'm moonlighting. You feel me? Some nights I'm at the joint playing the trumpet. You feel me? Getting busy. Right? When I step out of that and I say, I am going to do a 9 to 5 for my artistry, you start losing it. You start losing the thing. You start losing the sauce. You know what I mean? There's flashes of that. You know what I mean? Everybody, you ride a bike. It's like riding a bike, right? But sometimes that's not enough to fulfill a thing. It's not enough to fulfill what this passion or this pound means to me just to get on the bike and ride it. I can tell a story. Yeah. I can have the camera, I can have the batteries, have the cards. I can come in, multicam, do that. And it got to a point where the artistry was gone. The fun, the holy smokes, what was that? That's gone. You know what I mean? And I try to pass that off. Let's find another editor. Let's find another shooter. Let's find another thing. That wasn't me. You feel me? That was me trying to put this into a box again, and business and systems, and they work. You know what I mean? We've proven that systems do work. Like I said, there's a dance. There's a dance that says, cool, let's leave that business stuff alone. Let's go back and let's go play. You feel me? Let's go back, get in shed, grab some musicians. Let's go do it. You feel me? That's the fun. That's the cool stuff. And we saw that in the machine camp. We saw, let's just make it up. Let's just make it up as we go. And how rewarding was that? You know what I mean? How rewarding was that to unplug for a little bit from the business, unplug from the 9 to 5 and say, cool, we'll stay out here till 2 a.m. You know, have machine glizzies. You feel me? Yes. Just being out there amongst the folks, you know. And that's fun. That is what makes art and what makes this worth it, you know. Makes it worth it.
To me, you said the way of knowing consuming, that sounds like controlled chaos.
So when I think about fear and how it's taken me away from where I was, it is negotiation. It is saying, cool, if I do this, will you just stay off my back a little bit? If I just put this over here and put this piece in place, can you just stay off my back? That doesn't work that way. You know, you get complacent with saying, all right, everything is in place. If this happens, I got a fail safe here, I got a fail safe there, and then you start realizing you're just waiting for worst case scenario, and you don't live anymore. What is it? You just don't move. What is that? What is that? Analysis paralysis. I deal with that a lot. You know what I mean? I have to figure out every single thing. I have to figure out every single edit before I sit down. And that took the fun out of it. You know what I mean? I used to say I was scared of a blank timeline. But that's where the magic is. You know what I mean? Blank. I used to ask myself, Maurice, can you be great again? Before every single wedding edit. And that's where I was. Can you be great? Can this be as good as your last one? And then you realize, or you would tell me, Maurice, they're not looking for the next greatest thing. They hired you because of the previous stuff. The things where in the moment you were great already. So flow, you know what I mean? And to find a way to get back into that flow has been to stop negotiating with fear. Stop saying, all right, can we make a deal here? Can we, if I just push for an hour, can we just make a deal that it'll all subside? And it's like, no. You got to say, I don't subscribe. I don't accept that you're scared. You know what I mean? You wouldn't be here if you were scared. You'd still be working at Secrets. You'd still be doing stuff for checks. You know what I mean? End of the week checks. You know what I mean? I left Secrets. I said, this is my last time punching out, guys. I'll see you. They're like, what are you going to do? I have no idea. I'll DJ until I figure it out. You know what I mean? Where are you going to drive? Where are you going to put your board on your back? I'll figure it out. Somebody come pick my board up so I can ride my bike down there, and then I'll just pick it up from your place and go DJ, you know? And that's how I got here. You know what I mean? And for whatever reason, got away from that, you know? But no more. You know what I mean? It has to be a strict line in the sand, or a strict line that says, cool, man, I'm just not going back to that. I'm not going back to fear. And like I said, it's negotiation. Oh God, here we go. It's going to creep up. And it's like, no. Action is the biggest combatant to fear. You know what I mean? Action over fear. Uh-oh. Battery died. Yeah. And so now I've just been in the practice of getting my feet moving. Just move. You know what I mean? We'll figure it out. We ran into some roadblocks getting this set up. It's all right, cool. Where do we go? Let's move. Let's pivot. Let's go somewhere else. Let's figure something out. And here we are. You know what I mean? There is no fear sitting here. This is another rep. This is me saying, today I'm going to fight back. And a lot of times people lean on motivation to get through things. If I just get motivated enough, it'll work itself out. And motivation doesn't show up every day. Motivation doesn't come and says, all right, let's get out of here and let's go. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just grit and willpower that says, just get your feet moving. Just get up and do the thing. And say, after that, we'll figure it out. You know what I mean? When you don't move and when you don't do the thing, you don't know what is on the other side of that. We do know what happens if you sit around. Nothing gets done. That's the only constant thing that happens when you negotiate with fear. Nothing gets done. We know that. You know what I mean? You don't go into battle and say, yeah, you got to do something, brother. You can't sit in the back. That's just where I am. That's just how I handle that. Yeah. One thing that people think about my story that is not true, and it's probably a little deeper than this, but that I've grown up. I don't really feel like I've ever grown up. I feel like I've always been in touch with the childhood me, and I strive to make that little guy as proud as I can. You know what I mean? I see that manifest in my kids. You know what I mean? Being able to show them, sit with them the same way my dad did with me. You know what I mean? It's just always being in touch with the kid in my mom's room. You know what I mean? In a room that was this brainchild. You know what I mean? I'm going to sit down and edit and do those things. I come off as this business polished thing, and that is who I have to be. But deep down inside, people, I don't allow people to see the cut up Maurice. You know what I mean? I don't allow people to see the big old smile joke telling when we're riding around kind of thing. That is me. That is why I tell stories the way I do. Is childlike in the way that is all new, and I approach any shoot or any client with that same kind of openness and newness. You know what I mean? I walk into every single wedding, no matter how many times I shot it, with a newness of, that is my flow state. Is wow, that angle's pretty cool. Holy smokes, you look cool from down here. Holy smokes, if I do this, you know what I mean? I'm just a big kid with money for toys. You know what I mean? I get to tell stories, how I see them in my head, or how I did see them before, or how I did dissect things or movies or shots that I liked growing up, or even now watching things and saying, wow, reality TV. I'm saying, how do they put that together? But that childlike newness is what I think my flavor is. I don't walk into a situation and say, oh, well, you stand over here, you do this. We always get to first base, and then we say, all right, how do we push that? That is the newness. That's the childlike thing. You're going to run to second? Yeah, that'll be fun. Let's go to third. You know what I mean? And let's slide. Yeah, that's crazy. And that's who I am. And if you walk into the studio, it's a lot of childish things in here. You know what I mean? And it's not a bad thing. I do a lot of Legos. I do a lot of things that keep me in touch with being it's art. You know what I mean? It is me saying you now have access. You now have the thing to bring those child Maurice in 8th grade. You have the things to bring that to life. And I think people saw that. I think people resonate with that kind of storytelling. Like, wow, Maurice, like you said, I didn't see myself that way. You know what I mean? But my flow state is cool. How new is this to me? How new is this story to me? How different is this from someone else's story? And that's what we pull out. We pull out that newness, that thing where you've never seen yourself in this light, and is not. And we get cinematic and we do those things, but it is a thing where we are trying to push the envelope in a way that is always going to be new. It's always going to be a different kind of flavor that says, whoa, I never saw my plate of food that way. Whoa, I never saw myself sell real estate that way. And it's like, yeah, that is cool, isn't it? Yeah, that's pretty dope. That's pretty cool. And that kind of stuff is I don't let people into that. You know what I mean? I'm very protective. And that's, it's not a fear thing, but I'm very protective of that Maurice. You know what I mean? I don't want to say trauma, but there's a lot of things he had to go through to get to here, and I'm very protective of him. You know what I mean? I'm very protective of myself. You know what I mean? And you saw when you came in here, I was very put the wall up, and cool, it's strictly business. You know what I mean? And I think that's the rap that I get is, Maurice is tough to work with. I'm protective. You know what I mean? This has afforded me a lot of things to provide for my family and people around me. This is a gift. This is a thing you have to nurture, and you have to I don't want to say gatekeep or wall off, but I am very protective of, like I said, that 8th grade Maurice, and that's who I am. And I don't think a lot of people, if you follow the story, you see those little things, you see little spurts of that. You know what I mean? And little things here and there, and I'm trying to get better. This is an exercise, this is a rep of saying, here is Maurice, here is that little dude, you know what I mean? That guy who just kept shooting, just kept going, no matter where I was. Like, I had a camera. He's a camera guy, you know. Yeah, cool guys, come on, let's shoot something. So that is him. So when we're creating content, and what the goal for creating content is for me is to really shine light on what it takes and what it means to be an artist, right? I think people don't understand what artistry is, right? Sometimes artistry is downtime. Sometimes artistry is I can't go in. Sometimes artistry is this, right? There are times where artistry doesn't fit into 9 to 5, right? Artistry is misunderstood, right? And this level of what we're doing, no one's seen before. We're just two guys, right? I'm from round the way. I'm a hometown kid. I make it look easy, right? And I don't think people understand what passion really is. You know what I mean? I don't think people understand that in my quiet moments where it looks like I am not creating, my mind and my place, my flow is always connecting dots. It is always looking for that newness. It is always repping. It is always doing reps. We walk into restaurants, we say, how will we do this? You know what I mean? It does not stop. You know what I mean? And that's fun for me. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that watching a movie gets tedious because I'm trying to break down everything. That's my artistry. That's what I love to do. That's homework. That's where I find the most joy. You know what I mean? Holy smokes, that was dope. Play it back. Let me see how I would do that. You know what I mean? People don't really get the access behind what it means to be an artist. You know what I mean? It is not a job. It's not it's passion, and passion is so passion isn't readily available in today's time, and I don't know how to say those words. But it's passion is a gift. Passion is I don't know how to describe what
it's rare.
it's rare. That is what passion is. Passion is rare, right? And so I mean, it looks different for everybody, right? But not often enough do we share what passion looks like on the other side of the camera, right? And I think people misunderstand, because we don't tell that story enough. They misunderstand what it takes to do what we do. You know what I mean? There's a lot of experiences that we have to go through and that we have to put ourselves into, a lot of space that we have to put ourselves into to be able to do what we do day in and day out. And people don't see that enough. And that's what I hope this series does. That's what I hope Taking Down the Wall does. And we talk about authenticity all the time. And that's what I want to be back in touch with, is saying, no, that's just who I am. I have fun. I'm a big kid. And that all lends to me being able to better serve as a storyteller, and to be able to better create as an artist. When I think about Jason at the first shoot, and then he comes into the studio for the first time, and then I get to know him a little bit better, I think we are the most dangerous, because when I talk about seeing myself at that age walk into the studio, it has completely come to life. And that's the most dangerous thing, is around your age is when I was riding a motorcycle to and from work. I don't know how this is going to work out. Yeah. But that's why we're the most dangerous. It is, you've really sparked a thing that says, I don't know why this just came up, but Lion King, when he says, remember who you are. You feel what I'm saying? That's really what it felt like. It really felt like, don't forget how you got here. Don't forget that you didn't have it all figured out. You just kept walking. You just kept doing the things. You just kept showing up. You know what I mean? My first partnership, I lived with a guy. My rent was paid because I showed up. Fair enough. And it was like, cool, this percentage goes here, this percentage goes there, this percentage goes here, and your cut is your rent. Thank you. Cool, I'll just go DJ, I'll go do something else. You know what I mean? I'm going to keep this thing running. I love how this is going. I'll do it. This is exactly what I wanted to do. And I was on my bike. I did a production with my boy D up in Philly. And I came back and I showed him just what that reel was, right? I don't think I've ever showed you that. He was like, damn, I need you. I need that. I need that. And it's like, to spark that for him and say, cool, here's how we go. Here's how we go is, we are dangerous because there is a newness that you have, and a newness that I've experienced, that matching those two together, it gets out of control. You know what I mean? It gets, let's do it. You feel me? You want to climb that mountain? Sure. You got supplies? Mm-mm. Yeah. It is, we're the most dangerous because, and again, the childlike thing is we're both sponges. You know what I mean? And I haven't shut that part of my brain off. And I don't think I'll ever lose sight of what being a sponge means. I'm good at what I do, and I know there's always something else to learn, right? And the analogy of a jazz musician, right, is cool. I am good at this little pocket kind of thing, right? And someone else comes in. You mind if I step in real quick? You just jump in on your set. Cool, come on in here. Something you might play, something you might do, might say, ooh, this pocket feels a little bit different if I go here. And I've heard this before. Let me follow him. Let me accompany him and let him be great. And we do that very well. You know what I mean? There's sometimes, hey, that's your solo there. Get to work. You feel me? And you just fall back into that pocket. You feel me? We don't have to be playing the loudest at all times. You know what I mean? And being able to make art and music in that way, it makes it dangerous, because you never know any. I mean, we use that analogy a lot as a jazz musician, and you think if you go to a jazz club, you're always going to go back because you know that's not going to be the same as it was last week. I got to see who's going to step in this time. I got to see what version of this shows up, and that's dangerous. That is dangerous in the coolest way as an artist. To be able to sit down and say, let's just turn it off. I know when I packed up my gear and got here, I had all the tools I need. You know what I mean? However many keys are on a keyboard, that's all I brought. You know what I mean? But if I go in there with the, all right, I know how we're going to do this one, you know, you never give yourself the chance to be great. All right. But we're able to say, cool, here are the tools. Where are we going to start at? Boom, 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 boom. Cool. Hey, I heard this new thing, right? My week was a little bit different. I'm going to play that same kind of riff with the experience I had during the week. You know what I mean? And being able to allow someone to say, yo, why don't we set the light up this way? Cool. Where'd you get that from? You know what I mean? I had a good week and I want to show them in this kind of light. I think this would apply for here. The playbook, you know what I mean? The cookbook, you know what I mean? Oh, let's go to page 77 on this joint because I tried this over here. That's jazz. You know, that's jazz. But that's what it is. That's the fun of being able to be in the same space and time with someone who understands the value of that, and the newness of. I might not have played as many gigs as you do or have. But I got this little thing I've been working on, you know what I mean? And me being able to step back and say, well, go whippersnapper, let me see what you got, you know what I mean? And say, oh, I've seen that before, you know what I mean? It's a little rough. We're gonna work on it. I'm gonna help that, right? But it's saying, cool, take the floor real quick, take the solo, let me see what you got, and because as an artist and how we tell stories, it's experiences. You see weddings completely different than I do. You see sports completely different than I do. And that has value. You know what I mean? And being able to say, cool, let's be out of control. There are no top dogs, right? Yes, I've created this thing. Yes, I've built this thing. And you're helping me get better at who I am and my role. But even in that, I'm okay with saying that's his solo. You feel me? That is his solo. And as an artist, as a business, as a company, that's dangerous. And it's cool to be a part of.
I really go into a speed question.
Give it to me.
All right, this or that.
Full transparency. I'm scared of inspiration. I'm scared of, and this is me being a kid. You know what I mean? I'm scared of people saying, "Ha, ta-da! He's just a kid." You know what I mean? And I battle with that. I battle with what you told me. You know your shit, Maurice. Lean into it. You know what I mean? I don't lean into that enough. I don't lean into here's who I am and here's what I think. You know what I mean? Here is because of I'm very qualified to speak on this subject, right? Because I feel like I'm just a kid. Life's happened so fast. I don't realize that I'm 37. I don't realize that I've been doing this for 20 plus years. And a lot of times I am quiet about that. You know what I mean? I don't tell people enough how long I've been doing this, how much I've seen, who I've worked with, what I've done. And imposter syndrome is a fear thing. You know what I mean? And so I shy away from inspiration and more discipline. Keep that kid in line. You know what I mean? So the more work I want to be able to create this year is things that exist long after. You know what I mean? As mile markers, I want to serve clients to say, we have to have you back because we are not those people again, right? You have given us a thing that has allowed us to grow. And that mile marker, we are a mile further than that, and we need to have you back. I want to do more of that, and that's why referrals are cool to me. Like, on the outside, I guess we'll get better at it. You know what I mean? On the outside, people don't really know who we are, right? And so it takes a level of First Project Hill to say, boom, oh, I see why they tell stories the way they do. I see why they operate the way they operate. Right, but that takes a level of, you have to be in here. You have to be in this space to see that. And I don't want to say it's not fair, right, to potential clients. But there is a level of, you have to be around us. You have to see how we dig in on a client and the questions we ask when we do our therapy session for a client, to say, I never would have asked myself about my business, never saw my business in that light. And that is a thing, that is a thing, right? That is a thing where we don't just show up. We say we show up. We show up with cameras. We show up with batteries. But behind the scenes, we really give a damn about the story we tell, right? You don't just do anything to us. You don't just sell real estate. Nope. There's a bigger story. There's a reason you're good. There's a reason you have a message. You have a story, right? And people don't really know that we dig in on things like that. You know what I mean? People don't know that we, like I said, we give a damn. You know what I mean? And outside of angles and lights and toys, we really dig in on who a client is. And that's why when they see themselves, right, they think it's just to see themselves. But we're able to orchestrate a story with their own words to say, I never would have said that about myself if you just turned the camera on. What do? I sell real estate from here to Delaware. I have a portfolio about this big, and those things. It's not how we tell your story, right? You've watched someone do this. You may have had a time in your life where you weren't able to afford a house. And so now that you can, and you want to give that same feeling to clients that you serve, that's what makes you, right? That's storytelling. That's not just, let's come in here and do a highlight reel. You don't make food just because I'm good with salt and pepper and seasonings. You feel me? The way you cook a dish is because you've smelled that before, right? You've been over someone else's shoulder at home when you were a kid, and you know that feeling of when you show up to your grandmother's house. Not every storyteller can do that. Not every videographer can do that, right? This dish isn't just a thing. There is no just for us when it comes to clients. You know what I mean? That's storytelling to me. That is the sauce, and we gave it away. You feel me? But that's how. And people, you tell me all the time, the way you interview is crazy, right? Because I know people have stories. That's my experiences. That's my things. What, as a kid or as a background player to life, right? What questions would I want someone to ask me? And then how do I take that experience and lend that to someone else as a storyteller? That's what we do. That is the sauce. It's a cool. Forget all that. You know what I mean? You don't just sell cars, bro. You don't. Right? You don't just do a thing. You have a story. You wake up every day and you do this. You're investing in yourself. You've called us for a reason. Let's tell people that. Let's tell people we don't want to do boots on the ground. You know what I mean? And when I say boots on the ground, that's hammering away. That's a this. That's a blase blah. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's a literal thing. You know what I mean? That's what you see on the news. So and so was here. It's a squirrel on skis. You're gonna see a squirrel on skis riding in a little pool. Cool. That squirrel had to get up. Let's dig into that part. Let's dig into that part of your story. Let's figure out how you became to be a thing. And we might not even show a dish. You feel what I'm saying? But if somebody walks into your restaurant and they smell a thing, they're going to instantly connect that with something else. They taste a thing and they say, here's the story in this dish. That's what makes you a chef. That's what we pull out. That's the brand. That's the cool part about what we do is it's the oldest kind of thing. And so there's a lot of ways to tell a story. What do I want to lend to this craft? Right? And it is that style of storytelling. It is the things that I watch that resonate with me the most is watching a documentary of some sort and say, oh, I would ask this question. Boom, it happens. Well, now I'm in. You know what I mean? The way you are weaving this thing and going around and saying, hold on right here, boom, put a pin in that. I'm going to tell you this, boom, boom, boom story. And now let's go back to that. And you say, holy smokes, guys. And lending that to clients and saying, you know what? I really don't just sell. You know what I mean? I really have more to this story. Us as a collective of this business really have more than just the business. You know what I mean? They all have to get up and be in a place at the same time to do the same thing day in and day out. And what makes you guys you? You know what I mean? And that's why I love interviewing, right? That there is, again, it always comes back to the newness and the childlike thing, right? Once we get set up, you see me just go into my like little flow thing, and it's like, cool. I'm actively paying attention and actively saying, let me learn a little bit more about you. How do you think about this? How does this impact the way you serve? And that's a gift. That's passion. That separates angles from storytelling. You know what I mean? That is the thing that makes what we do, and makes what resonate with the people who have found us. That makes us the value. You know what I mean? In your own words, you're going to walk these people down. Your audience is going to say, I had no idea. I had no idea it was bigger than this. I remember we did a real estate agent a couple of years ago, and we talked about her dad, and we talked about his business that he grew. And then he got into a little aspect of this, and she said, oh, how do I apply what I learned to this? And then we get to why you serve this area. You know what I mean? But we set up this thing where now when you walk into a room, you're received a little bit different. You know what I mean? People understand who you are. You know what I mean? And it's not just, oh, she's going to come in here and list my house, or, oh, they're just going to come in here and cook me a thing. It's really digging in and going through this therapy session of what makes you move, what makes you tick. Why do you get up every single day outside of a check? There's something that makes you get up. And if you can't find it, right, I can promise you we'll dig it out. You know what I mean? I can promise you. There's not been, and it's not a thing that I want people to, I don't want people to be emotional during their interviews, right? But there has been few and far between where people do not get emotional because they don't see themselves that way. And being able to not break someone down, but really organize who they are, right? Life is all a story. There's a beginning, middle, and end, right? And that's how if there is sauce, that's how I break down any interview I do, right? Is what's your beginning? Who are you? What makes you? What's your foundation? Where are you now? Right? And because of where you are now, where do you want to go? Right? And it's just that easy. It's just that easy to go through and, like I said, organize who a person is, organize what a business is, and say we don't have to show you signing papers and things like that. We want to show emotion. We want to show what resonates. We want to show what makes you you. You know what I mean? We don't do ourselves the justice of doing that, and that's what I hope this project or this workout session lends itself to. It's saying, here's who we are. This is where we started. Here's where we are now. And this is what we're looking forward to in the future. This is what we are working towards. I don't want to say hope for, right? We're not hoping we make it to the top of the mountain. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to tell stories. And this is how we're going to get there. And enjoy the show. You know, here's who we are. The Brand Unplugged. I am Maurice Waters Jr., formerly known as DJ B-Side. I am very humbled. I'm very proud. And excited again. It's good to be in that space. This is the Brand Unplugged. Peace.